Columnist for the New York Post, Michael Walsh. Michael, how you doing tonight, sir?
Hey, Cam, how are you?
Great. Thanks for coming on the show again.
Oh, you're welcome. It's my pleasure.
You had a post today, Holder's Hell Week, mentioning right off the bat that Congressman Darrell Issa is now calling for a special prosecutor to get to the bottom of the, quote, festering mess known as Operation Fast and Furious, as you put it.
Right.
So what's your take here? You say that this has been a hell week for Holder, not just Fast and Furious, although now that, again, you've got these calls for a special prosecutor, I think that certainly ratchets up the pressure for the Justice Department. But really, you know, in all of these scandals, you're starting to see things heat up for the Attorney General.
No, you really are. I mean, he's got Light Squared, that's coming down the pike, and Congressman Issa is going to be investigating that as well. And, of course, we have Solyndra, which is probably the mother of all scandals. We'll have to see how that plays out. But I think the Fast and Furious thing, which I've written about several times, as you know, really tells you something about what the government's attitude towards the citizens are. And as I was saying today, if you use Occam's razor or Occam's AK-47, and you say the simplest explanation is most likely to be true, the facts seem to suggest that this was a sting operation against American gun dealers, and that they walked these guns into Mexico, and then they would be able to point to them and say, "Hey, look, we're the bad guys here." They love us being the bad guys for some reason.
Well, and in fact, I mean, we did see that in news stories. The Washington Post did a big piece, "The Hidden Life of Guns," in which they talked about stores that were the #1 source for guns sold in Texas and found in Mexico. And it turns out that this store in Texas, Carter's Country, was working with the ATF. The ATF, whenever a suspicious sale or a suspicious character came in, wanted to make a sale, the clerks would contact the ATF. The ATF would say, yeah, go ahead, make the sale. Same thing happened in Arizona. You had these FFLs who were being told, go ahead, sell this guy 40 guns at a time, 50 guns at a time, even when these FFLs were objecting. They didn't want to do this.
Exactly, because they knew deep down inside they were going to get hung out to dry. And I think we've even had some evidence of that now with that tape recording where the ATF guy is basically saying, "Ooh, gee, you think this is a good idea?" And then they were talking about the death of the Border Patrol agent as collateral damage. And I mean, if that's true, let's accept the government's explanation. What was the larger point they were trying to make? I mean, what was the projected good of this scheme if it wasn't to just criminalize American American gun dealers?
Well, absolutely. And as you say, and you point out something I think really interesting. You say Maricela Morales, the Mexican Attorney General, estimates that at least 200 Mexicans have been killed with Fast and Furious weapons. The Los Angeles Times reported today, I don't know if you saw this, Michael, Maricela Morales also said that our government, the Obama administration, has still not briefed anybody in Mexican law enforcement about Fast and Furious 7 months after this operation became public knowledge.
No, that's right. I put that in the piece as well, and they haven't apologized for it. So, again, I go back to my question. Had this worked like a charm, what good would have come out of it? And I don't have an answer to that, and I haven't heard the Attorney General give us an answer to that. Have you?
No, not at all. I mean, that's what nobody can figure out. Even the ATF field agents, in fact, especially the ATF field agents, who started speaking out about Fast and Furious, guys like Agent John Dobson, they've said, we can't figure out what was supposed to happen here. They told us, we were going to go after the heads of these cartels or the higher ups of the cartels. Somehow we were going to be able to trace the guns to them. But without that cooperation from Mexican law enforcement, how could you make any arrests?
Right. Plus, you know what? Some of these guys were already confidential informants for the FBI.
Yep.
So now you've got the FBI saying, okay, this guy's our CI. Don't come down hard on him. I mean, the whole thing was such a mess that even had it worked right, I go back to my original point, what would it have told us that we didn't already know? Given the level of FBI infiltration into some of the cartels. As you know, we're sort of rooting for one cartel against the other at this point. It's almost, the way the old CIA would operate in a foreign country with supporting one faction against another faction.
So you've heard this too, then, Michael? The idea that right now we're sort of playing, playing on the side of the Sinaloa cartel because we believe that the Zetas are a more dangerous cartel, and if we can help the Sinaloas and take out the Zetas, then maybe some sort of accord can be reached or some sort of normalcy can be returned to Mexico.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I've heard that. That's found its way into certain print outlets. It wouldn't surprise me. It's always, as I say, been a characteristic of the agency. When it was trying to destabilize countries, you back one faction against another faction in what's effectively a civil war. Now in Mexico, it's an internal civil war that the drug dealers are having.
Mm-hmm.
But the intelligence agencies and the law enforcement agencies would prefer to deal with one devil they know instead of 10 devils that they only know one of. And that's why I think they're rooting for them, if that's in fact true.
Yeah. Now, one of the other quotes you mentioned from Representative Issa, there's an ongoing cover-up of a pattern of wrongdoing. Even though I have subpoena ability, I don't have the ability to lock people up for contempt until they fess up and give us what we want. You say locking people up will probably have to happen.
Well, I don't see how it can't. I mean, look, we're also dealing with, for the listeners, an inside baseball Washington game, which is that if ISA calls for a special prosecutor and the guy starts tomorrow, ISA's committee shuts down.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the end of that. So what ICE is saying is I want to run my committee through the end of the year, then hand it over to a special prosecutor. Now, that just coincidentally happens to be an election year, so that would do maximum political damage to the Democrats if that's the way he wants to play it.
Yeah, well, although, ISA pointed out that a special prosecutor is actually going to come from within the Justice Department. I mean,
there's that too. The Justice Department is theoretically doing its own, quote, investigation, unquote.
Right.
But a special prosecutor would have to operate independent of the Justice Department, and then that brings up, the whole other mess of, well, how have special prosecutors worked in the past?
Mm-hmm.
There's no check on them. Once they start digging their teeth into something, the next thing you know, you're at Monica Lewinsky. I mean, there's a lot of good arguments against a special prosecutor, but in this case, you're really asking justice to investigate itself, and that's not good.
Yeah, which is why Issa said, again, that he wants to have these hearings through the end of the year so that he knows more and knows enough about the investigation so that if the special prosecutor starts to, go off into the weeds, at least there will be people who will say or who can say, hang on, no, you need to be going back and let's investigate this stuff, or at least point out, again, you can't control what the special prosecutor do, but you could at least point out if indeed this investigation were to start turning into an investigation of Representative Issa, which I'm sure
exactly.
There are people in the Justice Department who would love to see that happen.
There's only one question. Was this a sting by the American government against its own people? That's really the only question here. If that question is off the table, then you have an operation that was just a total hash, and it made no sense and people got killed. But if it was actually directed against us, I think that's really a big problem. At least I have a problem with that, don't you?
Yes. Yes, I do. And you go back, and it's so funny to me to hear the people on the left, particularly like groups like Media Matters for America, who say, these crazy theories that the Obama administration was doing this to push for more gun control. Look, I mean, we know that the Obama administration was asking for details about Fast and Furious a year ago so that they could try to push for new reporting requirements for border state FFLs, something that they pushed through a couple of months ago. They're now being sued over.
Right.
And very early on, even before Fast and Furious began, you had Attorney General Eric Holder calling for a renewed semi-auto ban. That was picked up and echoed repeatedly, even to this day, by President Calderon. President Obama has said he's all in favor of that gun ban, but he doesn't have the political will. Well, look, if you don't have the political will in Congress to pass a gun control ban, then what's to say you wouldn't want to sort of create that impetus?
Exactly.
And try to make it such a pressing issue that Congress wouldn't have any choice.
But that's clearly one possible explanation. Now, okay, we all love Media Matters, God knows, right? They are just as nonpartisan as they can possibly be.
Oh, yes.
But okay, Media Matters, if that's not the case, what is the case?
Mm-hmm.
You tell me what the point of that operation was. Just go ahead.
Yeah.
You tell me. Because it does not pass the Occam's razor test. It is not the simplest thing. Any other explanation is too complicated already.
Michael, again, I can't thank you enough, sir, for writing about this issue, helping to spread the word about Operation Fast and Furious. It's amazing to me that there are still some people out there that aren't aware of this, but it was a great column in the New York Post, and look forward to doing this again very soon.
Hey, thanks, Cam. Let's just keep everybody's eye on the ball here because this could be a very, very explosive issue.
Absolutely right. Michael Walsh joining us tonight here on Cam and Company.